HOA Karen called 911 over my pool umbrella, so I sent her a message across the sky. Part 1. You called the cops on shade? Watch this. It started with sirens, not the kind that fade into the background like city noise. Number. These were full blast, screeching tires, 2 squad cars skidding to a halt just outside my front gate. I was relaxing under my brand new fire truck red cantilever umbrella, iced tea in hand, dog snoozing at my feet, peaceful. And then, chaos. I honestly thought something serious had happened. A robbery. Maybe someone passed out from the heat. I even looked over the fence to check if the Johnsons were okay. But no. One of the officers walked up and said the words I'll never forget. "Sir, do you have a permit for this umbrella?" I blinked. A what now? That was the moment I realized this wasn't about crime. This was about Karen. Just 2 days earlier, I had treated myself to this beautiful shade beast. A red, adjustable umbrella that arched perfectly over my pool. It was foldable, portable, didn't violate a single HOA rule. I double-checked, triple-checked. I was golden. But apparently, red triggered something in Karen's HOA soul. She lived across the cul-de-sac, the type who acted like she was the sheriff of suburbia, clipboard in hand, lips always pursed, sun hat big enough to detect solar flares. I didn't even get 24 hours before she stormed across the lawn like she'd been sent from Capitol Hill. "Nope, that umbrella is not allowed," she declared. I laughed. I thought she was joking. "It's not permanent," I said. "Doesn't violate anything." Karen squinted at me like I'd just insulted her begonias. "It's red," she snapped. "It ruins the neighborhood aesthetic." The aesthetic of beige vinyl siding and patches of dead grass? I brushed her off politely, told her the HOA bylaws didn't mention anything about color. And honestly, 10 other houses had umbrellas. Mine was just bolder. I figured that was the end of it. Oh no. That night, I found a note taped to my front door, written in Comic Sans. That was the first crime. It read, "You have 24 hours to remove the offensive umbrella before HOA action is taken. Consider this your warning." No letterhead, no signature, just threat vibes. I emailed the real HOA board. They had no clue what I was talking about, which meant one thing. Karen was going rogue. And then came the cops. HOA Karen called 911 over my pool umbrella. Banner that said, "Not yours." Part 2. Clipboard Wars and the Fake Inspector. You'd think after calling 911 over an umbrella, Karen might take a step back, reflect, maybe do some yoga under her own perfectly beige patio set. But no. The very next day, she came back stronger, and somehow even more annoying. Clipboard in hand, determination in her eyes, she looked like she was about to audit the IRS. I spotted her from my kitchen window, marching door to door like some HOA stormtrooper, and not just casually knocking either. She was giving people speeches. My phone buzzed. It was Joe, 2 houses down. She's going door to door collecting umbrella complaints. Wants people to sign a petition. I told her to take a hike. I laughed, but deep down, I was boiling. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. This was obsession. Karen didn't care about shade. She cared about control. So, I did what any reasonable person would do. I ignored her, until 2 days later, when a man in a neon vest showed up at my door claiming to be an official HOA inspector. No ID, no clipboard, just a tape measure and a suspicious level of confidence. "Here to take measurements of visual violations," he mumbled. Visual violations? I asked for paperwork, credentials, even a business card. He gave me a blank stare, then muttered something about being hired by Karen. I told him flat out, "Step onto my property without permission, and I'll have you escorted off. Permanently." He flashed a fake smile, backed off, and walked straight across the street. To Karen. There she stood, hands on hips, like a budget Bond villain waiting for her evil plan to kick in. They spoke for a few minutes. She pointed wildly toward my yard like I had a missile silo hiding under my pool floaties. He scribbled something onto the back of a grocery receipt and walked off. That evening, boom, another citation in my mailbox. This one, failure to comply with visual consistency, obstruction of field inspection. Field inspection? From who? The local grocery bagger with a tape measure. I didn't even bother calling the HOA. Instead, I sent everything to my buddy Greg. Now, Greg's not just any lawyer. He's the kind of guy who eats HOA bylaws for breakfast and burps out cease and desist letters before lunch. He read the citation and literally laughed. "This is bluff. You're in full compliance. They're trying to scare you because Karen won't stop squawking." So Greg drafted a masterpiece, a certified cease and desist warning both the HOA and Karen that if the fake inspections, harassment, or bogus reports continued, we'd be filing our own motion, with receipts, legal precedent, and enough documentation to turn their little HOA into a courtroom punchline. We mailed it, signed, sealed, certified, and waited. Next morning, knock knock. Guess who? Karen, fuming, waving the letter like it was radioactive. "You think this scares me? You're bullying a concerned citizen." I smiled, calm as ever. Trespassing, false reports, and impersonating an inspector. That's not concern, Karen. That's desperation. Her voice cracked. "You're weaponizing the legal system to silence me." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself. From you." She stood there trembling, lips twitching, eyes wild. Then she turned, stormed off, and screamed over her shoulder, "You'll regret this." I took a sip of iced tea and whispered to myself, "We'll see about that." Part 3. Shadows, Citations, and Skywritten Shade. After that explosive morning showdown on my porch, I thought maybe, just maybe, we were done. But no, Karen doesn't retreat. She reloads, and apparently, her new weapon of choice? Shadow measurements. Yes! Really? That evening, my motion sensor camera pinged. I checked the feed, and there she was. Again. Crouched by my side fence, flashlight in one hand, measuring tape in the other, like she was mapping out Area 51. I stared at the footage in disbelief. She was measuring the umbrella's shadow, at night, under moonlight. I wanted to scream, or laugh, or both. Instead, I printed out a freeze frame of her mid-crouch, flashlight beaming like a ghost hunter, stuck it in a cheap frame, and left it on her doorstep with a sticky note. "Smile for the shade police." The next morning, she didn't mention it, but the message was received. For about 12 hours. Then came the HOA surprise inspection. Again. Another man, new vest, same story. No credentials, no appointment, just sent by Karen. This time I didn't even argue. I walked out calmly, smiled, and handed him a copy of my lawyer's cease and desist letter. His face turned pale. He didn't say a word. Just turned around and left. But the real blow? Oh, that was still coming. Because that night, I had an idea. A big one. The kind of idea that doesn't just win. It flies. See, if Karen wanted everyone to notice my umbrella so badly, fine. I'd make sure no one could miss it. I started Googling aerial banners, the kind they fly over beaches for birthdays and proposals. found a service, booked a weekend slot, wrote a message, kept it simple, director, unforgettable. Hey, Karen, this shade's not yours. Paid, confirmed, locked in. Delivery date? The HOA's annual Summer Harmony Picnic, which Karen just so happened to be chairing this year. Oh, the irony. I kept the plan to myself, didn't tell a soul. But that whole week, I prepped like it was a military operation, cleaned the yard, set up my chair, polished my sunglasses, because if I was going to throw shade, I wanted it to sparkle. Saturday afternoon rolled around, blue skies, no wind, a perfect day for drama. I arrived early to the community park, picked a cozy corner under a tree, umbrella staked next to me like a flag of glorious rebellion. Neighbors waved, nodded, a few smirked knowingly. Karen? She was busy flitting around with a clipboard and a pastel sash that read, "Picnic Chair Woman," like she was in a Suburban beauty pageant. At 2:59 p.m., I checked my watch. At 3 p.m. sharp, a faint hum filled the air, and then it appeared. A tiny speck in the sky, growing louder, ooh, closer. Until finally, the banner unfurled behind the plane. Bold, bright, beautiful. Hey, Karen, this shade's not yours. The crowd exploded. Gasps, laughter, phones whipping out like it was a UFO sighting. Someone dropped their lemonade. A kid screamed, "Mom, look!" while pointing at the sky like the second coming was happening over the bounce house. Karen? Oh, Karen. She froze mid-sentence. Her mouth hung open, eyes locked on the banner like it had personally insulted her ancestors. And then she snapped, stomped across the grass toward the HOA booth like a woman possessed, demanded they stop the illegal aerial harassment. Dave, the HOA president, just blinked and said, "Karen, we don't regulate the sky." The place lost it. Applause, howling. A slow chant even broke out. "Shade! Shade! Shade!" And me? I sipped my lemonade, smiled, and said nothing. Because sometimes, silence is the most glorious victory of all. Part 4. Karen's meltdown goes viral. The plane disappeared into the horizon, but the chaos it left behind? Oh, it was just beginning. Karen stood there, arms stiff at her sides, eyes blazing like twin solar flares, lips moving, but no words coming out. She looked like a villain who'd just realized the hero had won, and the credits were already rolling. Then suddenly, she turned and charged toward me. I didn't flinch, just adjusted my sunglasses, took another sip of lemonade, and raised an eyebrow. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice cracking like glass under pressure. "Enjoying the weather?" I replied calmly, nodding toward the sky. "Lovely shade today." Her fists clenched. "This is defamation. I'm going to report this to the FAA, the City Council, maybe even Homeland Security." I nearly choked on my drink. "Karen," I said, "it's a banner." Not a ballistic missile. But she wasn't listening. She spun on her heel and made a beeline for the HOA booth again, waving her arms like she was directing airport traffic. Dave, the HOA president, was trying to enjoy a hot dog. That ended real fast. Karen slammed her hands on the folding table. "You need to file an incident report. This is a targeted airborne attack. I demand consequences." Dave looked at her, blinked, and said the most legendary HOA line in Suburban history. "Karen, it's a joke, and honestly, you kind of earned it." The look on her face? If looks could kill, Dave would have been vaporized on the spot. Meanwhile, across the park, phones were still recording. The banner, her freakout, the chanting. The whole event had become a full-blown neighborhood spectacle. And the internet? Oh, it delivered. By sundown, a TikTok clip titled, "Karen vs. the Sky Banner Hoot Spire" hit 50,000 views. By midnight, it was past 300,000 and climbing fast. The comments? The sky said what we're all thinking. Umbrella King strikes again. Plot twist. The plane was HOA approved. One commenter asked, "Can we get this guy a Netflix series called HOA Justice?" Even better. Someone from down the street made a t-shirt design, bright red with a cartoon umbrella and the words, "Not yours, Karen." It sold 72 shirts in 2 days. And Karen, well, she tried. She posted a long-winded, typo-filled Facebook rant claiming the banner had psychologically damaged her and violated a sacred community gathering. No one bought it. Even her closest HOA ally, Margie, replied with nothing but a laughing emoji. And that might have been the final straw. Because the next morning, an envelope showed up on my doorstep. Inside, a flyer. Emergency HOA meeting called by Karen. Topic: aerial harassment and umbrella regulations. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. She was going to double down. Again. But this time, I had backup. The neighborhood had seen it all. The drama, the pettiness, the airborne banner of poetic justice. And they were done. This wasn't just my fight anymore. This was a rebellion against the reign of Karen. Part 5. Karen tries to ban the sky. So there we were, the HOA emergency meeting that Karen demanded, held in the same community center where retirees usually argue over lawn heights and flower beds. But tonight? Oh, tonight it felt like the Super Bowl of suburbia. Every folding chair was filled. People were standing in the back. Even Mr. Jenkins, who hadn't left his recliner since the Bush administration, was sitting front row with a notepad and popcorn. Karen stood at the front, like a dictator in pearls. Clipboard? Check. Stack of evidence photos? Check. Self-righteous fury? Oh. Double check. She cleared her throat dramatically. We are gathered here tonight to discuss a matter of great importance. A violation not only of our HOA standards, but of basic decency. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "Here we go." Karen pulled up a projector slide and displayed a blurry screenshot of the banner mid-flight. The words, "This shade's not yours," flapped across the sky in bold, mocking letters. She pointed a trembling finger at the image. This was an act of aggression, an intentional psychological strike launched from above. A giggle escaped from the back row. Karen glared at the room. "This isn't funny. This banner disrupted a sacred community picnic, one I planned. It humiliated me and damaged the spirit of togetherness." I stood up slowly. "Karen," I said, "the picnic had barbecue, balloon animals, and free cookies. The only thing it was missing was your ability to chill out." The crowd laughed. Karen tried to speak, but someone from the audience raised their hand and said, "Can we see the signatures on your petition again?" Boom. Right back to Bannergate Round 2. Karen pulled out her infamous petition again, but this time, people were ready. Why does one page say Janet W. and the next says Janet Dubia? And why is one signature literally just Dog Mom with a paw print? Karen flushed bright red. I had help collecting them." From who? Ghosts? The HOA board looked tired. Dave rubbed his temples like he regretted every decision that led him here. "Karen," he said finally, "we've reviewed the bylaws. Again. There's no rule against banners, and there's certainly no jurisdiction over the sky." Karen's jaw dropped. No jurisdiction? So anyone can just fly a banner? With whatever they want? A kid in the front row raised his hand. "Can I do one for my birthday next month?" The room erupted in laughter. Karen, of course, didn't laugh. She turned toward me and shouted, "You think this is over? I'll take this to city council. state zoning, maybe even the FAA. I shrugged. Be my guest. Maybe they'll send you a jet with "Calm Down Karen" written on the wings. Even Dave couldn't hide his grin at that one. At the end of the meeting, a new vote was held. One Karen never saw coming. A motion to formally censure her. Not for the banner, but for filing false HOA complaints, harassing neighbors, trespassing, impersonating officials, wasting law enforcement resources. It passed, unanimously. Karen stood frozen, eyes wide, mouth open. Then she turned, grabbed her clipboard, and stormed out like a supervillain in a soap opera finale. Someone in the back whispered, "There she goes, Commander Clipboard." And just like that, the reign of HOA terror had cracked. But it wasn't over yet. Because Karen still had one more desperate move up her sleeve. Part 6. Karen goes to court with a color chart. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That after being publicly called out, unanimously censured and mocked by half the zip code, Karen would finally retreat into quiet reflection with a copy of How to Be a Decent Neighbor and a glass of boxed wine. But no. Karen did what Karen does best. She escalated. A week later, I got served. Yup. A real lawsuit, filed in small claims court by one Karen E. McClipboard, alleging emotional distress, defamation via aerial display, and this one was my favorite: intentional color sabotage. Apparently, the red umbrella had caused her recurring migraines, community embarrassment, and irreparable spiritual discomfort. I'm not making this up. She even attached a color psychology chart to her court documents, highlighting how red is associated with aggression, war, and chaos, which, ironically, matched her vibe perfectly. When I called my lawyer friend Greg, he laughed so hard, I thought he'd pull a muscle. "She's suing you. Over the color red and a plain banner?" I nodded. "Yep. She also said I was waging psychological warfare with fabric and altitude." He chuckled. "Cool. Let's nuke this in court." The day of the hearing was pure gold. Karen arrived in a cream-colored pantsuit, clutching a binder so thick it looked like she was auditioning for Law and Order, HOA Victims Unit. I wore jeans, a polo, and brought a copy of the HOA bylaws. Simple. Director. Deadly. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who clearly had seen it all, flipped through the paperwork with a look that said, "I didn't get a law degree for this nonsense." Karen launched into her opening statement. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I am not here as a villain. I am here as a protector of peace and visual harmony. This man," she pointed at me with a trembling hand, "used a bold red umbrella, visible from outer space, to destabilize the aesthetic equilibrium of our community." The judge blinked, then looked at me. I raised a hand. "May I respond?" "Please," she sighed. "Your Honor, the umbrella is portable, legal, HOA approved, and frankly, not a military weapon. It's a piece of sunshade." Karen interrupted, because of course she did. "He also flew a banner, a giant humiliating banner that mocked me publicly." The judge nodded slowly. "I see. Do you have a copy of the banner?" Karen whipped out a photo, like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial. "Hey, Karen, this shade's not yours," she read aloud. The entire courtroom paused. Then, snickers. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. Karen gasped. "This is a hostile environment." The judge cleared her throat. "Miss McClipboard, did you file false reports to the HOA and police over this umbrella?" Karen hesitated. "I filed what I believed were valid concerns." "And did you trespass onto his property?" "I was checking for height violations." The judge raised an eyebrow. "With a ladder?" Karen wilted slightly. It was a step stool. Then came Greg, cool, calm, and armed with receipts. He presented photos of the umbrella, weighted and within regulation, HOA emails confirming I violated no rules, footage of Karen trespassing, a copy of the cease and desist letter, and the kicker, comments from neighbors confirming Karen's long history of complaint spam. The judge flipped through the files in silence. Then she closed the folder and looked at Karen. Miss McClipboard, this court is not the place to settle personal vendettas. Karen opened her mouth, but the judge raised a finger. Your claim is dismissed. And then, just as Karen turned redder than the umbrella itself, the judge added, You are hereby ordered to pay court costs and the defendant's legal fees. Karen's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, the judge replied. Now, let's all go outside and try not to be ridiculous adults today. Court adjourned. I walked out with Greg, who fist-bumped me and whispered, Justice, served with shade. And Karen? She stood in the parking lot, clutching her binder, staring at my car like she was imagining it exploding from banner-induced rage. But even I didn't expect what she'd try next. Because when entitled, People Lose Control, they don't just get angry, they get creative. Part 7. Karen declares war with a DIY HOA newsletter. After the courtroom smackdown, I truly believed Karen might take the hint and disappear quietly into her beige curtains. But no. This is Karen we're talking about. When logic fails, when law fails, when a literal judge tells her go home and touch grass, Karen does what Karen always does. She makes her own rules. 3 days after the trial, I opened my mailbox and found a folded piece of glossy cardstock. No envelope, no return address. On the front, a clip art photo of an umbrella with a red X over it. Title in big Comic Sans letters, The Harmony Herald, Volume 1, Taking Back Our Neighborhood. Oh, yes. Karen had created a newsletter. And not just any newsletter. This thing was a full-on manifesto. The opening line, In these dark days of poolside anarchy, we, the silent majority, must rise against visual chaos and shade tyranny. I nearly spit out my coffee. She went on to accuse me, without naming me, of course, of leading a campaign of aesthetic terrorism and performative rebellion disguised as outdoor decor. One section was labeled, The Science of Color Aggression, and included an uncredited quote that read, Red makes people violent. That's just facts. Another part featured an anonymous testimonial, which I'm 99% sure she wrote herself, saying, I used to feel safe walking past that house, but now I just see red and feel threatened. Then came the best part. The final page had a fake survey asking, Should we ban umbrellas that clash with community values? Should HOA rules include mental health impacts of neighbor decor? Should Karen be given more decision-making authority? I couldn't stop laughing. Apparently, neither could the rest of the neighborhood. Because I wasn't the only one who got a copy. Joe texted me a photo of his. Caption, Is this satire or is she serious? Even Mrs. Delgado, who still types in all caps, forwarded it on our group email with the subject, Who let Karen touch a printer? But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. She went door to door. That weekend, neighbors started spotting her in full campaign mode. Visor on, clipboard clutched, handing out more new letters like she was running for HOA governor. And what was she pushing? A community visioning meeting hosted in her garage. Flyer said, Let's take back our streets from chaos, clutters, and umbrellas. Only 4 people showed up. 3 of them were her book club friends. The 4th was her husband, who left halfway through when she started handing out color-coded visual compliance scorecards. Meanwhile, the rest of the neighborhood, We were having a spontaneous red umbrella celebration on my front lawn. No lie. Someone brought red cupcakes. Joe brought a red cooler full of beer. Kids ran around waving mini red flags. And my umbrella? Spinning like a victory trophy in the breeze. At one point, someone even put a Bluetooth speaker in the grass and played "I'm Still Standing" by Elton John. And then, the meme war began. Photoshopped images started flying across the group chat and Facebook group. Karen, as Napoleon, holding an HOA clipboard. My red umbrella photoshopped into famous paintings like The Last Supper and American Gothic. One even had the banner trailing behind the Millennium Falcon with the words, "This shade belongs to the rebellion." Karen responded with a post that started, "This is no longer humorous. It's a coordinated attack." Then she signed off the post as, "Acting Interim President of Visual Standards and Community Morale." What? Nobody voted. Nobody asked. But Karen? She declared herself in charge. I had to reread it twice. But there it was. In bold. "If the current HOA board cannot control visual disruption, I will take leadership until order is restored." The comment section lit up. "We didn't elect you, Darth Shader. Visual standards? You literally used Comic Sans. Karen, blink twice if you need help." Still, she tried to rally. She made new signs, taped them to light poles. Community meeting to discuss umbrella regulation, attendance encouraged. Nobody showed up, except the sprinklers, which turned on halfway through and sprayed her clipboards like a poetic mic drop. By now, the HOA had seen enough. Dave, the board president, called an emergency vote the next day. On the agenda, motion to formally strip Karen E. of any informal leadership roles, self-appointed titles, or pseudo-authority. It passed unanimously. They posted it to the HOA bulletin, the group page, and Dave even printed it on red paper, just to drive the point home. Karen didn't post after that. She didn't walk her dog, didn't water her begonias, didn't even glare through her blinds for a full week. And for the first time since this war began, the air felt lighter. But if you think that was the end, oh no. Part 8. Karen strikes back with a spy drone and a moral compass. You'd think after the courtroom loss, the HOA shutdown, the epic aerial banner humiliation, Karen would have finally waved the white flag, right? Oh, you sweet summer child. This is Karen we're talking about, and when a clipboard warrior runs out of laws to twist and neighbors to intimidate, she turns to the next best thing, technology. It started subtly, almost too subtly. I noticed strange buzzing overhead one Saturday morning while I was skimming leaves from my pool. A soft hum, then a slight shift in the breeze. At first I thought it was a large bee, or maybe some kid's remote helicopter toy. Until I looked up and saw it. A black drone, just hovering, right over my pool. Its little red light blinked like it was recording, watching, collecting. I didn't panic, didn't wave or shout. I just stared and muttered to myself, "You've got to be kidding me." The drone zipped away after a few minutes, smooth, silent, surgical. But the next day, it was back. And not just once, twice, 3 times. Always the same routine: hover, record, retreat. By Monday, I had enough. I checked my security footage, tracked the flight path, and wouldn't you know it, the drone always returned to the same house, Karen's, of course, because if you can't get the HOA to ban a red umbrella, and you can't get the police to arrest someone for shade crimes, you do what any self-respecting suburban villain does. You launch a spy drone. The next morning, I printed a still image of the drone from my camera footage, slapped it on a yard sign, stuck it right in front of my pool. It read, "Smile, Karen. Your drone's on camera, too. Neighbors thought it was hilarious. One person added a sticker that said, "Neighborhood airspace is not a toy." Another dropped off a tiny plastic drone with googly eyes glued to the front. And Karen, she lost her mind. She marched across the street, red-faced, gripping a printout of her own drone footage. She waved it like it was a court exhibit and shouted, "This is my airspace. I can fly wherever I want." I stayed calm. "You can," I said, "as long as you don't record my backyard without consent." She narrowed her eyes. "I wasn't recording, just monitoring." "Monitoring what?" I asked. She blinked, hesitated, then hissed, "Moral violations." That's when I realized Karen thought she was a suburban Batman, only instead of fighting crime, she was patrolling color palettes and pool furniture. She stormed off again, swearing she'd take it to the FAA and report me for cyber defamation. By the end of the week, Dave from the HOA showed up at my porch with a cup of coffee and a weary sigh. "She emailed us twice," he said. "Once to propose a drone oversight committee. The second, with an aerial photo of your yard labeled Zones of Disharmony." He paused. "Dude, she made a color-coded map." I couldn't help it. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my lemonade. Dave joined in. We just stood there, two exhausted homeowners bonded by trauma and foam. Then he said the magic words. "We're revising the bylaws next month, drones included." I nodded. Good. Because the next day, I sent my own drone into the air, bright red, custom stickered with a mini umbrella decal, and a tiny message underneath that read, "Guess who's watching now?" Karen saw it. She screamed. I know, because my drone recorded her sprinting inside and slamming the door like she was under siege. It didn't even hover long, just made one glorious loop above her house and flew back home like a victorious hawk. She didn't call the cops this time, didn't email the HOA, didn't even post on Facebook. She just vanished for a week. And then it happened. A moving truck pulled up in front of Karen's house. No flyers, no announcements, just boxes, boxes, and silence. She packed quietly, avoided eye contact, wore a hat so low it looked like she was hiding from paparazzi. On her last day, she taped a final note to the HOA bulletin board. Just one line. "Enjoy your shade while it lasts." We did, Karen. We really, really did. And now, that red umbrella? It's still there, still spinning in the breeze, still undefeated, because in the end, all Karen ever wanted was control. But all she left behind was a viral video, a meme legacy, and a drone hobby she never quite mastered. Part 9. The HOA holds a shade celebration, and my umbrella becomes a legend. So Karen was gone. No more 911 calls over umbrellas. No more trespassing with tape measures. No more impromptu shade inspections with binoculars and a clipboard. For the first time in what felt like forever, the neighborhood felt like a neighborhood again. And that's when the most unexpected thing happened. The HOA? Yeah, they threw me a party. No joke. Dave knocked on my door one afternoon, a sheepish grin on his face and a pastel-colored flyer in hand. "We're organizing a neighborhood event," he said. "Kind of a community refresh." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" I asked. "And," he smiled. "We're calling it Shade Fest, a celebration of peace, umbrellas, and petty drama finally coming to an end." I laughed so hard, I nearly dropped my lemonade. Shade Fest, a name so gloriously passive-aggressive. Even Karen's hair would have curled from the sass alone. The flyer featured a cartoon umbrella wearing sunglasses, with little bubbles that said things like, "Free popsicles under the shade," "Pool noodle jousting," Karen free since the flyover of 2024. It was perfect. And you better believe I showed up. I didn't just show up. I arrived in style. I brought the famous red umbrella, mounted it to a rolling base, hung twinkle lights from the frame, and added a tiny banner across the top that read, Community Legend. Kids ran under it. Neighbors posed for pictures beside it. One guy even offered to buy it for his backyard. Said it radiated victory energy. There were lawn games, barbecue, a DJ who, I kid you not, played an auto-tuned remix of my flyover banner. This shade's not yo-o-o-oors. And then, Dave took the mic. He thanked everyone for coming, cracked a few jokes about a certain former neighbor, and then turned toward me. He said, "One of our own stood firm, against chaos, against nonsense, against beige tyranny. So today, we honor that courage with something very special." And then he handed me a plaque. Yes, an actual engraved metal plaque. It read, "In honor of standing firm in the shade, for your unshakable patience, legendary calm, and world-class trolling. HOA Evergreen Lane." The crowd clapped. Someone shouted, "3 cheers for the Umbrella King!" Even Mr. Phillips, the guy who once reported a squirrel for vandalizing his bird bath, gave me a thumbs up. But the best part was the final surprise. At the edge of the park, tucked beside the rose bushes, was a small wooden bench, freshly installed, beautifully carved, and above it, a little sign that said, "Karen once tried to ban this shade. Now we sit beneath it and laugh." I didn't cry, but I came close, because after all the noise, all the pettiness, all the complaints and citations and late-night surveillance missions, this one quiet bench, this silly sign, meant something bigger than all of that. It meant the neighborhood had learned, that it had finally stopped being afraid of one person's outrage, and more importantly, it meant I wasn't alone. We had come together, not out of spite, but through laughter, stubbornness, and a little splash of sky-high drama. Shadefest became an annual thing. Every summer, we gather under umbrellas, share stories, eat barbecue, and toast. Yes, toast. To the legendary banner that flew over our homes and reminded us. Sometimes, the pettiest battles bring out the strongest communities. As for the red umbrella, it's retired now, mounted proudly in my garage, but every once in a while, when the sun's just right, and the wind whispers like a memory, I roll it out to the lawn, let it spin, and smile. Because in this neighborhood, shade isn't just something you sit under. It's something you stand for. Epilogue. The umbrella that changed everything. It's funny. You never think something as simple as an umbrella could spark a movement. It wasn't a war. It wasn't politics. It wasn't some great moral crisis. It was just a red umbrella, a patch of shade, and a neighbor who didn't know when to stop. But somehow, through all the noise, the yelling, the clipboard threats, and the late-night fence peeking, it became something bigger. It became a symbol of what happens when good people stay quiet too long, and finally say, "No, that's enough." Now, when I walk through the neighborhood, it's different. I see color again, in umbrellas, garden chairs, even one guy's flamingo mailbox. Kids laugh without glancing over their shoulders. Neighbors say hi without worrying about HOA gossip. And the HOA board, they're finally reasonable. Dave still brings it up from time to time. "You really turned the tide, man, with an umbrella and a plane." We laugh, but we both know it's true. Because after all the drama, all the flyovers, all the clipboard wars, the real win wasn't just mine. It was everyone's. It was the whole block realizing that peace isn't about staying quiet. It's about standing your ground, kindly, firmly, even when someone tells you shade isn't allowed. And as for Karen, well, last I heard she moved to a gated retirement community. Rumor has it she tried to start a new HOA chapter there, but according to a message I got from someone on Facebook, she filed a complaint about someone's garden gnome, and the entire board resigned the next day. Classic Karen. But here, on Evergreen Lane, we're free. Free to sit in our yards, free to sip iced tea under our umbrellas, free to decorate, to laugh, to live, without fear of someone measuring our flower pots. So if you're ever caught in a petty war of lawn ornaments or paint shades, just remember, sometimes the best revenge is staying cool under pressure, literally. And if all else fails, rent the plane. Because at the end of the day, shade speaks louder than words.